Hello, everyone, and welcome to Online Lecture 12, Writing the Methods. So today we're going to go through how you actually write up a method section. So let's start by talking about what goes into a method section. Okay, so this section of the paper provides the methods and procedures used in a research study or experiment. Detailed information on the participants, equipment, materials, research design, variables, and actions taken by the researcher and the participants. Enough information to allow other researchers to replicate your experiment or study. So basically, you are now getting into the guts of the study here, and you're describing to someone else exactly what you did, exactly how you decided on who your participants would be, what measures you used, all of that kind of stuff, so that someone else could replicate your study if they wanted to. And that is the key part there. Okay, you want to give them enough information to replicate. So how do you organize the method section? Well, you use subheadings to divide up different subsections. And the subsections that you will include are participants, materials, design, and procedures. Okay. Some people also have a statistical analysis section that is included within the methods. We're not going to do that here, but I just want you to be aware that some articles, some journals actually do that. Okay. So participants, let's start there. Now, broadly speaking, you will describe the participants in your experiment, including who they are, how many there are, and how they're selected. More specifically, you will provide the following information in the subsection. The population used. Who is the population that you are targeting? Who are you hoping to generalize the study to? Now, if you were doing this in person, most people would actually say Westchester University undergrads, or maybe the Westchester University community, could be Westchester University freshmen, but you have a much broader spectrum this time, a lot more to choose from. So maybe who you're trying to generalize to are adults with major depressive disorder. Right? Maybe that's your population. Okay. Next, you want to describe the total number of participants and the number assigned to each experimental condition, or the number in each group. So I'm going to tell you that the minimums are you need to have at least 10 participants per group, and you need to have at least 30 participants total. The max is 60 participants total. The max is 60 participants total. And then the reason for that is that's all the data I can really make up to give you. So even if you want to have thousands of people in your study, there's only 60 that I'll be able to give to you. So we're going to keep it to 60 for the purposes of this class. Okay. The way the participants will be selected. For instance, will they be randomly selected from the whole population or only from volunteers? Will they not be randomly selected, but only volunteers? Will they be offered money or other compensation to volunteer? Will your participants be representative of the general population, and will the selection process be restricted in any way? Now that's a good question, because oftentimes we are a bit restricted, right? Let's say you're doing something where they have to view words. Well, if they cannot see, then they may not be good participants for this particular study. You might have to eliminate, say they have to be able to be able to see the words in order to participate. They couldn't be blind to the extent that they cannot see these words. Okay? Or you might need them to have certain level of hearing ability in order to hear something, that you might be playing tones for them, or they might have to listen to music or those sort of things. So think those things through. What exactly do you need from them, and therefore how might you have to restrict that process? Okay. Other examples: will the study only use psych majors, only women, only persons who are deaf, etc.? Will the study eliminate any people with a vision problem, color blindness, hearing problems, etc.? So these are things you want to think through for this part of your write-up. Indicate how the participants will be assigned. Will they all be assigned to the same group, or will different people go to different groups? Are you going to randomly assign people to different groups? Is it going to be based on some characteristic? Okay. After the study is conducted, list the major demographic characteristics of the participants. Right? Age, sex, etc. You will collect at least 3 demographic variables, at least 1 nominal. You could do sex, you could do year in school, you could do eye color, you can do whatever you like. And at least 1 continuous, age. Okay. All right. Age might be a good example. You can choose others though. Okay. Okay. Right. So we just discussed this for number 5. If they go to different groups, will they be randomly assigned or assigned on the basis of a characteristic? Right. Okay. So here is an example of a participant section. 27 students from the University of Calgary, in this case 12 women and 15 men ranging in age from 17 to 43 years old, voluntarily participated in this experiment. There were 9 participants randomly assigned to each of 3 probe type conditions. Informed consent was obtained from all participants. Okay. Of course, you'll probably want to put that last line in yours too, that you obtained informed consent. And again, remember, you're not actually working with any real people. I will be supplying data. Okay. Notice how each of the questions is answered in here. Right. I think they could have done a slightly better job of saying if there were any restrictions in terms of who they selected, but other than that, I think they did a good job. Okay. All right, next, materials. You will describe the materials, measures, equipment, or stimuli used in the study. So this could include testing instruments, technical equipment, images, or other materials used in the course of research. I suspect a number of you might be using some type of measure, some type of, let's say, a measure of stress maybe, right? Or a measure of perceived health. So there's definitely some measures out there. Maybe you're doing a measure of a particular mental health set of symptoms, right? Maybe you're looking at psychopathology, maybe you're looking at depression, I don't know, but you're probably using a measure. You might also be using images, you might also be using words. So think about all these different things that you're using. And you're going to provide citations and references for any measures or instruments that you use. And you're going to provide a copy of your measure or instruments in an appendix. Okay. Here's an example. A website was created for presenting various surveys. See appendix. The Keirsey Temperament Sorter, Keirsey 1998B, and the Keirsey character sorter, Keirsey 1998C, were utilized to measure personality type. 2 other surveys developed by the researcher were also administered: a short demographic survey, see appendix, and an assessment of the degree of domestic violence experienced by each participant, see appendix. All the surveys were conducted on a computer with the results recorded on an answer sheet, see appendix. So here it's just the Keirsey temperament sorter and the Keirsey character sorter that we want to make sure we cite. Those were not created by the researcher. Those were already existing measurements. The rest we don't have to cite because they're created by the researcher themselves. Now, I will encourage you very, very strongly to use instruments that are already out there, not to try to recreate the wheel. Now, if it's a short demographic survey, like we were talking about before, that you need at least three demographic questions, sure, create that yourself. But if it's something else, if you're measuring some kind of construct, I highly encourage you to find something already out there. And if you're struggling with that, just let me know and we can talk that through. Okay. One other thing I just want to quickly point out is this B and this C and why that's there. Well, first of all, we might imagine that probably in the introduction somewhere there was a Keirsey 1998A. And when you have the same author and the same year that you're trying to cite, but they're not the same article, you tend to start using A, B, C to differentiate them. So that's why the B and C are there. Okay. Next, let's talk about design. You will describe the type of design used in your study. You might be doing an experiment or a correlational natural manipulation study. You also might be doing a between subjects design or a within subjects design. Between subjects design is when you are comparing groups to each other, right? So maybe I'm comparing freshmen to seniors. Or a within subjects design is when I'm comparing the same group to themselves over time. So this would be if I had a group of freshmen, then I waited 3 years, and then I tested them again as seniors. Same group twice. First one is 2 different groups, or it could be 3 different groups. Next one is the same group twice, or it could be 3 times. I'm going to ask that when you choose the design for your study, that you limit yourself to 2 or 3 groups, or 2 or 3 different times that you assess your folks, okay? And that's just going to keep your statistics a little bit more reasonable, a little bit easier to accomplish, okay? So that's what we're going to do. So I want you to specify the variables as well as the level of these variables as well. Okay, so let's look at a particular example. Okay, this experimental study uses a between subjects design. The independent variable is species and has 3 levels: human, Martian, and Vulcan. The dependent variable is intelligence as measured by the well-validated cross-species intelligence test by Smith, Zeb, and Tapau, 2264. And yes, I did intend 2264 to be the year, a bit of a humorous example for you. So there's an error here. And I'm going to show you what it is in just a moment, but I want you to look at it for a moment on your own. I want you to see if you can figure out what the error is. Okay, so now let's look at the corrected slide. It's not an experiment, it's a correlational study, right? The previous slide said experiment, this says correlational. Why is it correlational and not an experiment? Biggest reason, we didn't control the independent variable. We didn't manipulate the independent variable. It's species. We can't tell people what species they are. They either come, in this particular fictional case, as human, Martians, or Vulcans. Can't really tell them which species they belong to. We can't assign some people to be human and some people to be Martian. So it's a correlational study. Okay. Just making you aware of that for your own studies. Be aware of whether you're assigning people to different groups or whether that is kind of self-determined. Okay. Notice, by the way, that I say the independent variable species and has 3 levels. The other thing I probably could have done is with the cross-species intelligence test, I probably should have given a range of scores there. Okay, so I will encourage you to do that. Okay. Next, procedures. You will provide a detailed description of the procedures used in your experiment. Explain what your participants do, how you collect data, and the order of which each of the steps will occur. So up until now, if you've noticed, these examples have been pretty short. And aside from the occasional thing I've said that you might want to add, it's still going to be pretty short, right? Procedures is your longest section because I want a very detailed, good description of all of the procedures in your study. Okay. So now let's look at an example of this. Subjects were told that the study investigated the relationship between personality traits and academic performance as indicated by an anagram task and an attentional task. Subjects were informed that a practice anagram task would be followed by an attentional task and then the main anagram test, which was never administered. The intention of this misleading information about a second anagram test was to maintain state anxiety levels during the attentional task, which lasted several minutes without interruption. All subjects were told that the anagrams would be presented one at a time on the computer screen, and when they knew the solution, they should press the yes key and then write it down on paper. Otherwise, they should press the no key to move on to the next anagram. They were asked to solve as many as possible in 3 minutes. False feedback was then shown on the screen. Subjects under high stress were informed that they were performing well below average, and as a consequence, they had been selected to be videotaped during the main anagram task later in the session. To add credibility, video recording equipment was present in the test room. Subjects under low stress were told they had performed well above average and were reassured that the video equipment was not being used in this experiment. The attention deployment task was then given with the same instructions as those used by McLeod et al. In 1986. Subjects were asked to read aloud the top word of each word pair and to press the response button as quickly as possible whenever they saw a small dot probe. There was a short practice session before the main task. After the main task, the nature of the experiment and the reason for the deceptive feedback were fully explained. Subjects under high stress were also reassured that the feedback provided no indication of their academic ability. Okay, now that was a relatively straightforward experiment. I mean, there was a couple little pieces in there, and you can see that it still took a lot of time to write out those pieces. Okay, so stay tuned for an exercise that we will conduct together regarding the method section. That'll be happening in class. And also stay tuned for more details about a rubric that tells you more about writing the methods. Okay, that is all I have for you today. Stay safe, be well, and I'll talk to you next time.